For now, I'm going to open the one that ends in 6043. So you can't just double click this because it'll open in preview or whatever your default picture viewing app is. So you need to drag it to Photoshop. Beach ball. Or you can drag it to, you can grab the icon and drag it and drop it on your Photoshop icon to make sure that it opens in Photoshop and not in preview or a different program. So at first glance, the Photoshop interface probably looks somewhat similar. It's kind of set up the same way with our tools here down the side. And I put up a little, on Blackboard, there's a sheet that reminds you like the most useful tools. I think there's a couple in here now that have been added in the last couple years since I updated that sheet. So be aware of that, but the most common ones you'll need are all on there. The menu bar at the top is going to change based on which tool we have selected, which is similar to the other Adobe programs. And then we have sort of our panel area over here. So the layers are going to look different in Photoshop than they do in Illustrator. But conceptually, they're pretty much the same. It's just that they can do some different things in Photoshop that as compared to Illustrator. So in Photoshop, we can attach these adjustments to these layers, and we'll probably get to that today. And also, layers in Photoshop only have literally one layer to them. So in Illustrator, you could have a layer that had like thousands of things on it, right? Didn't matter how many things, they were just sort of like on that sort of like theoretical layer in space. And you could grab that layer, move around, and all those objects would move with it. That's because that's vector artwork. So it's all points and lines. So rather than being pixels, which is what these photos are, also called raster imagery or bitmap, these are all one flat surface of pixels. There are none of these discrete objects, no points and lines, although we will use the pen tool for getting selections. So if you keep pressing Command or Control plus to zoom in, you should get to a point where you can see the individual pixels. So for me, it's zooming into like 3,200%, and then I can see these individual pixels. So a pixel is a square unit, and it can only have one color in it. So even though this looks like it's, is a dimensional thing, it's because there's darker pixels on the side and lighter pixels on the inside of that shape, and that makes it look like it has dimension. So we're dealing with a completely different type of file in working with pixels than we are in working with vectors. So the other key difference between vectors and pixels is that pixels are limited in their maximum size to whatever is on that page. You cannot make a pixel image bigger, whereas a vector image, you could put it on a business card and a billboard, and it would still look crisp and clean, no problem. So that means if you're going to design something like a logo, you'd want to do it in Illustrator with vectors, so they can be used however you want. You can scale it. That's not going to have any problems. So I put this together in Illustrator. These are all vectors. And if I keep zooming in on this, like, it still is going to look perfect. Like, I never get to the point where I see pixels. I never get image degradation. It's always sort of crisp and clear. So you might be thinking, well, if vectors are, so perfect, why do we even bother with pixel-based imagery? Because vectors are not good at photorealism. So that's why all photographs, photography literally meaning drawing with light, they're captured on light sensors that pick up pixels and not vectors. So I can click on the image menu and then go to image size. And I can see that while this is not the highest quality photograph, I took this on a point and shoot camera in London. This is a London City Hall. Affectionately called the Onion because British people have to nickname everything. So this isn't like a super high quality photograph, but it's quite large. So I can see the pixel dimensions. I can see the dimension in inches. And then it says resolution 300 pixels per inch. So if we are going to print something commercially, so, like my, design textbook here for our upper level classes, this is a commercial printing job. Tons of awesome pictures and examples in it. Everything in here, at the size it's shown, it has 300 pixels per inch or possibly more. So if you're printing, you need 300 pixels per inch for it to print and look crisp and clear. If you're going to print off like a laser printer or an inkjet in your house or office or something, then you're probably fine with 200 pixels in an inch. If you're going to display an image on the internet, you only need like 72 pixels in an inch. So that's quite a difference in size. We are, in this class, going to work around 200 pixels an inch, just because, if you wanted to print it out, it would look fine. But it's also going to save us a lot of file size. So typically vector files, because they're just these like mathematical points and lines with fill and stroke and, maybe some effects on it. Unless you're real heavy into the effects and things, those files are much, much smaller because it's sort of saying like, there's a point here, a point here, a point here. That's a path. It's filled with a color. That's all the information it has to know. But in a raster document or bitmap image, it's still an entire screen of pixels. It's just all of these are white, and that shape in the middle is all filled with colored pixels. So it still has to remember every single pixel in the document. It can't just say, I'm a rectangle, has a shape in it. So it's really watering it down, but hopefully that sort of explains the difference in why like the file sizes are so different. And again, like the photorealism and photography itself are kind of the reason why the raster bitmap images are still, and will probably always be, actually the more popular digital image format. So they both kind of have their roles and pros and cons and things like that. Illustrator, as you can tell by his name, is more, illustrative. So if you're going to do like logos and charts, like draw some like characters, although some people prefer to draw in Photoshop. It just kind of depends what look you're after. If you want anything that has that like photorealistic look, you're pretty much going to have to work in pixels and Photoshop. For your projects, though, I'll have you start with a document that is just, I think they're 5 inches square, although we should double check. Just like a blank 5-inch square Photoshop document that's 200 pixels per inch. And then you'll like put pieces into it. Keep sort of your source images kind of as they are, and you'll just make different selections and then drop the pieces you've selected into that 5-inch square document and like remix and edit from there. So the workflow is a little different.